World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Now, when I was cooking up these upgrades, I went one class at a time, and Druids were smack dab in the middle. I had felt like I was finally finding my groove with these upgrades, but, well, I think I'll let you be the judge of whether I was right about that. Feral was another of those specs that it was hard for me to cook up upgrades for. I mean, there were no baseline multi-target combo point spenders, only a talent. And some of your rotational abilities were already being replaced in the talent grid, meaning those abilities were off limits for me as far as upgrading them goes. My options were limited. I hope I came up with a spread of upgrades that are interesting and useful in the end. Only time and feedback will tell. The first upgrade I came up with for Feral was Ferocious Roar, an upgrade for Ferocious Bite that deals slightly less damage per target, but it deals it in AoE. The second upgrade was Fairy Fire, which is actually an upgrade for Tiger's Fury. It's got a 30-second cooldown and increases the damage that your target takes from your attacks by 20%, and it restores 50 energy when you cast it. It lasts 10 seconds, but if you apply a bleed during Fairy Fire, the increase to the bleed's damage will last for the bleed's full duration. Fairy Fire also prevents the target from using stealth or invisibility. The third upgrade is Bramble Slam, an upgrade for Thrash that summons thorns from the ground in an area in front of you that last for 20 seconds and deal bleed damage to targets that stand over the thorns. Casting it gives you 1 combo point. The fourth upgrade is Briar Wrap, an upgrade for Entangling Roots. It deals nature damage over 10 seconds. It has a cast time, but Predatory Swiftness makes it a non-issue. Also grants a combo point when you cast it with Predatory Swiftness. The Deep Roots PvP talent causes Briar Wrap to last longer. The fifth upgrade is Pounce, an upgrade for Maim. It's ranged and it deals less damage than Ferocious Bite, but it applies Rake to the target as if you had cast it from stealth. It causes you to rush to the target and places you in stealth. The sixth upgrade is Headbutt, an upgrade for Skull Bash. It has a shorter cooldown and silences the target if you successfully interrupt them. However, it no longer charges to the target. The seventh upgrade is Healing Touch, an upgrade for regrowth. There is much more upfront healing, and the heal over time is very small. It has a much longer cast time, but Predatory Swiftness makes that a non-issue. It also grants a combo point. On to the thinking. Again, Feral was a tough spec to come up with upgrades for. On the one hand, it looked pretty complete. Swipe and Shred, Thrash and Rake, Rip and Ferocious Bite. On the other hand, it had no multi-target finishers except for a talent, and several things that I feel should be baseline, like the ability to cast Moonfire and having Bite prolong Rip's duration. Those are talents. But in the end, after some searching, looking up older abilities and seeing what's useful and when on Icy Veins, I think I came up with some things that can shake up the capabilities and make things more interesting. Ferocious Roar is meant to fill in the gap of having no AoE damage finishers, at least having none at baseline before talents. I figure it would have good synergy with Primal Wrath and Sabretooth. Part of me thinks that Feral should have this as baseline, but then again, since Ferocious Bite is used when you aren't using your combo points for Rip, it won't be that huge a sacrifice to swap out Roar in favor of Bite. Pounce is an older Feral ability. It was more or less Feral's version of a rogue's Garrote and Cheap Shot rolled into one. Since I found out that Maim is a fairly niche, i.e. useless, ability, I figure I'd give Maim another slightly less niche, i.e. less useless upgrade, one that lets you target swap and get a small head start on doing damage, since a stealth-boosted Rake is the first thing you'd use when you're opening a fight. Though it dawned on me that Pounce was originally intended to make for easier target switching the way I designed it here. It was meant to be an upgrade you'd only be able to use situationally, but since Stealth buffs both Shred and Rake, using this specifically to buff your refreshes of Rake would actually dramatically buff your single target DPS and make Pounce a normal part of your rotation. Probably you'd even use it at very low combo point numbers, since combo points only buff the damage that it deals up front, not the damage that Rake or the subsequent Shred would deal. So, shoot. Maybe this is too good. Or maybe I turned a useless ability into a perfectly viable and interesting shakeup for your rotation. I definitely need feedback on this one. Headbutt was a sign of me running out of ideas. A lot of the time, when I'm wondering what to do, I take the class's interrupt and add some silence if the interrupt is successful perk to it. Reducing the cooldown a tad is meant to make it more appealing. Taking the charge away was meant to make it a trade-off. There was something about Thrash that made me want to upgrade it. Maybe because it's the only one of the 4 basic combo point builders that didn't already have either fancy bells and whistles attached to it, or that wasn't already being upgraded by a talent. In any case, I decided to mix in some Druid magic and turn it into a kind of a version of Consecration for Druids. But what struck me was that even though bleeds are half of Feral's mastery, and even though Thrash and Rake are considered 2 separate bleed effects, the single target rotation on Icy Veins didn't recommend using Thrash unless you were either talented into Blood Talons or had a conduit that encouraged you to have as many bleeds on the target as possible. I'm guessing Thrash wasn't worth the global cooldown without those effects, and another semi-educated guess was that a longer duration might help to make it worthwhile. That's why I had Bramble Slam last longer. On a side note, I picked the name Bramble Slam because it had both assonance and consonants. Yeah, I'm a dork. That's also why I picked the name Briar Wrap. I'd thought about making Briar Wrap count as a bleed to take advantage of Feral's mastery, but I decided that would be a bit too good. I made it a damage over time because once upon a time, Entangling Roots was a damage over time as well as a crowd control, and I figure that since Feral already has a proc that can make Entangling Roots instant cast, then I might as well turn that into a damage spell that can also provide a combo point so it doesn't wreck your flow. At least, that was the intent. If feedback tells me I did the wrong thing here, I will change this. Actually, that's also why I dragged Healing Touch out of the proverbial bin. It was the original Druid healing spell in Classic, taking a long time to cast but having a very high spell power coefficient and very high healing. I figure more healing sooner is better in a pinch, so that's why I replaced Regrowth with it for Feral specifically. Since heal over times are what Restoration is all about, I wouldn't consider this upgrade for Restoration, but for Feral, it should be okay. I kept a small heal over time attached to it, even though there wasn't a heal over time attached to it in Classic, because I figured Swift Mend should be allowed to consume something if you have Restoration Affinity. If Restoration Affinity wasn't a thing, I'd totally drop the heal over time. For a while I had wanted to upgrade the Dash ability, and then I noticed that Tiger Dash was a thing. My policy is to avoid upgrading abilities that are already being upgraded in the talent grid, so instead, I decided to bring back Fairy Fire as a DPS cooldown, replacing Tiger's Fury. Tiger's Fury kicks in regardless of which targets you're attacking, and is better in multi-target situations. Fairy Fire is good for single-target situations, though. That's the kind of thing I do with these upgrades. Different ones are better or worse in different situations. The fact that you can swap them out at will whenever you're out of combat is part of their appeal. And now for a part that will make you quote Gandalf about me being a fool, but an honest fool. I had thought of an idea for a burst damage ability. One that consumes all your bleeds on a target, deals the damage that those bleeds would have done instantly, possibly with some percent modifier. If we really want force multipliers on this, then making it a combo point spender with a cooldown would get both halves of Feral's mastery empowering it. Now, getting something like this onto a Feral Druid spellbar isn't a bad idea in and of itself, at least I don't think it is, but the upgrade system is not the way to do it. Or if it is, then the way I did it in one of my earlier drafts certainly is not the right way. The upgrade that I had in an earlier draft was called Primal Slam, an upgrade for Soothe. It had a 90-second cooldown that consumed all bleeds on the target and dealt damage that those bleeds would do instantly. It treats Bramble Slam as if Thrash were on the target, but does not consume Bramble Slam. Soothe. I had this as an upgrade for Soothe. What was I thinking? If memory serves, I was thinking at the time that I had wanted to take a rarely used ability and make Primal Slam an upgrade for that. Maim had already been taken, so I thought, Soothe! That looks infrequently used. Right. Now's the part where I feel the need to be the victim of my own sarcasm. I think I've earned it with this one. Bar a class from using a cool burst ability if an anti-enrage utility ability is required in a given fight. Great idea! Take an ability that doesn't deal damage, indeed that almost does the opposite of damage, and make it into an almighty burst tool. Brilliant! Just about as brilliant as poop in an outhouse. I caught myself before I took this too far, and I put Briar Wrap in this ability's place, and that is okay as far as it goes, but honestly, Soothe! If Feral players want this as an upgrade, and if they don't like what I did with Pounce, then I could swap that out for Primal Slam, and use Maim for this instead. If I hear them suggesting that I use Soothe for this, I will assume that I'm the butt of the joke, as per usual. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I'd felt like I'd found my groove by the time I started cooking these up for Druids. Felt like I'd found my groove. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. Now, looking at Feral's spread, there's actually quite a bit that helps with single-target DPS. Fairy Fire, Briar Wrap, and Pounce come to mind. For multi-target DPS, there's Ferocious Roar, Bramble Slam, and that's it. I mean, I suppose I'd pick Briar Wrap after that, since at least Briar Wrap is more damage, but it's not multi-target damage. Is it okay that only 2 upgrades buff multi-target damage? Should I have done what I did with Frost Death Knights and dropped Primal Wrath down to a baseline ability? And if so, what should I have put in its place in the talent grid? I really need feedback to tell me how good or bad a job I did with Iteration 1. It wouldn't surprise me if people told me I did well for a first try with no experience playing Feral, which is another way of saying it stinks. Though, I believe this can be improved in subsequent iterations with feedback, so please keep the feedback coming. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.